All right, so I know I cover personal topics in my channel, but I thought of covering some political or historical topics as well. This is something that's close to me, to my background, and has played an international role, and that is the movement of the Taliban in Afghanistan. So I've read a lot of crap, some really good stuff, people that have covered the Taliban in Afghanistan. A lot of it is very crap. It's the reason why I say it's crap is because they look at, I don't want to call it minor, but they get too consumed with the movement itself and the thinking, which is important, but because they play a role. So obviously you have to understand what they think and how they make their decisions. But what's overlooked is the long term, I mean the foundational reasons as to why this group exists. I don't want to make this video again, I always say this, but there's a lot to cover. But the Taliban were a response and a consequence of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 79 until 89. So people sometimes who have not either experienced war or study war, they always think things are gonna just get resume back to, stability after such a devastating war. Guys, war has long-term consequences, not only the immediate consequence, which is misery and death, but the long-term consequences are the effects that linger on, right? So the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was very brutal. Over the exact estimates are hard to determine, but 5 to 7 million people were had to flee because the Soviets had a campaign of basically pushing people out. They when they invaded, they quickly realized that they're dealing with obviously with population that just doesn't want them there, but just with any country. So they were like, well, we don't know who the enemy is, we don't know who's firing at us, because the Afghans did not fight in conventional ways, obviously. Plus, how do you fight in conventional ways when you're facing a military that's 10, 20, 100 times more powerful than you, with all kinds of resources at their disposal, including land, air. I can't say naval because obviously Afghanistan is landlocked, so Navy is useless. It's not gonna work. But so since they couldn't really determine, and they quickly realized that they are fighting against the local population, so they had a campaign of basically clearing, what they called clear the area. So they were just do these military operations that were obviously any human being from anywhere would just leave or either die. So if they had families, kids, obviously any parent, any family would want to save their family. So Afghans started to cross the border into Pakistan. They couldn't go to the north because that was USSR. So they had two options. Either they could go west, which is Iran, and or south, which is Pakistan. So a lot of them had to leave. As far as I know, close to between 5 to 7 million had to basically leave the country. Close to 1 million were killed. So just, these numbers are like, I'm just saying these things, guys, but it has devastating effects. And the issue I want to cover is the orphans. So a lot of kids that lost their dads or both of their parents, they are now they're left on their own, even if they have relatives. Those were the kids in the 90s. I mean, the 80s. The Taliban first came to power in 96. So before that, the movement was brewing, and a lot of their foot soldiers and some of their commanders, higher ups, were orphans from the Soviet war. So now you guys might be like, well, how can a 9-year war create an orphan that's 40? You're right, yes, but a lot of their foot soldiers were in their late teens. So they either their kids were either orphans, or they were just they lost a close family member. Now So what happened to those orphans, especially in Pakistan? So what happened is that they were weaponized. They were weaponized to go back. Obviously, there's a lot of grievance, resentment, and a lot of pain of losing a loved one. So the way they were weaponized by leaders, powerful individuals that knew how to use them in the wrong ways. And there were multiple reports from the Pakistani journalists, and there's one female, I forget her name, she actually extensively covered this throughout her life, specifically the issue of kids and how they're being weaponized. Yeah, so that's how the movement of the Taliban started. And after the Soviets pulled out, it was obviously internal fighting, because once you go through that kind of devastating war, and in a country that's very heterogeneous, so Afghanistan is not a homogeneous society. There are different ethnicities, different kinds of people, different languages. So all the leaders of these ethnic groups, they quite did not get along, especially after the devastating conflict that the country just went through. So there was internal conflict, and eventually the Taliban, who are majority from the south, and orphans, they came through and took power in '96. But yeah, my main top issue that I wanted to cover is the war's long-term consequences. I've covered this in my other video, overall war and its terrible long-term consequences, I believe it's called. So this is more specifically about that. But yeah, that's how these movements come into being. I think the background reasons are really important. People overlook this. There are some prejudiced people that say garbage like these people are like this. There's nothing I can say or want to say, because that type of mentality is coming from a prejudiced point of view. They just think that other people should not do better, or they're not capable of doing any better, and they completely dismiss such things where it's war or lack of resources. They just think you should just do stuff out of thin air. But yeah, the Soviet invasion created a lot of devastating long-term consequences that the country is still facing 40 plus years later. So yeah, that's it. It's a very grim topic. I will be covering some other historical topics. I just was thinking of kind of diversifying the issues I cover, but this is one of them. So yeah, I've read a lot of books on the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and obviously it's a country of my background, so I studied the country very closely. But yeah, these movements come into being because of there are other background reasons behind them. And the inception of the Taliban movement was as a direct consequence of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989. All right, guys, stay safe, stay well. Talk later.